Hi everyone, welcome to Everything Dog Training podcast with me, John McGuigan, Glasgow dog trainer and behaviour consultant. So thanks for joining us, whether it's your first time or whether you're a repeat customer. I appreciate you taking time out of your busy schedule to listen to our content. I really appreciate it. As always, give us feedback. You can leave comments on a variety of podcast platforms. Certainly leave it on Spotify, and if you could give us a review on iTunes, that would be very helpful. Share it with your friends, tell them about it, let them know the good news about the podcast and all the great information that's on there. That would really help us out. Any questions that you've got for future episodes, then please email me info@glasgowdogtrainer.co.uk, or you can get me on Instagram, Facebook and YouTube at Glasgow Dog Trainer. So apologies that this is a little bit, a couple of days late. This episode's going out. Usually I try and get them out on Friday. But I was away seeing Ian Dunbar, who's in the UK, doing a few seminars this week. So we drove down to Manchester on Wednesday and came back on Thursday. It was good to catch up with Ian again. It's been a long time since I've seen him, so it's great to catch up with him. So today our guest is Eileen Koval. Hope I'm pronouncing that right, Eileen. So yeah. I know that you told me it's not Koval, but hopefully I'm pronouncing it properly. So, Eileen Koval, CDBC, CBCC Knowledge Applied, CPDT Knowledge Applied, and MSc in Operations Management, is a fully certified behaviour consultant with the International Association of Animal Behaviour Consultants, the IAABC. She believes the foundation of a good cross-species relationship is understanding the needs and normal behaviour patterns of each dog as an individual, as they were bred to be. She enjoys helping humans and dogs communicate more effectively to create brilliant relationships with joy, purpose and fulfilment in all species involved. She offers private consultations for serious dog behaviour issues, obedience or manners and agility training. Eileen developed a unique online course to help pet parents and trainers develop reliable snake avoidance behaviour off-leash through positive reinforcement techniques. These techniques have been applied by trainers worldwide to teach dogs reliable avoidance of dangerous environmental hazards and off-leash property boundaries. She lives on a small ranch in Las Vegas, Nevada with her husband and their Nederlandse Kooikerhondjes. So hopefully I'm pronouncing Kooikerhond properly as well. And what I'd like you to do if you're listening to this episode, so I know that we've got a worldwide audience, we've got people all across the world listening to Canada, the US, somebody from South America, somewhere I can't remember, apologies, contacted me and said that they're listening to maybe in Peru, and Australia, New Zealand, across Europe and the UK and Ireland. So what I'd like you to do, especially if you're listening to it in the UK and beyond where you're listening to this, in the UK we don't have any apex predators, we don't have any real dangerous predators. The biggest predator that we've got other than humans in the UK that live in the wild, if you like, are foxes. Foxes and badgers are it. So no bears, no wolves. We've got some big birds of prey. We've got golden eagles and osprey and sea eagles. But they're not really a hazard to anything other than their own prey animals, which are fish and small animals. The Victorians killed everything. Bears, long time, hundreds and hundreds of years ago since there's been a bear living wild in the UK, and the Victorians killed the last wolf in 1796 or something like that. That actually might predate the Victorians, maybe the Georgians. Anyway, whoever that was, whatever horrible reign that was. So we don't have any predators like that you do elsewhere in the world, and we only have 3 species of snake. 2 actually. We've got the slow worm, which is a legless lizard, so it's not classified as a snake, but it looks like a snake. The grass snake, which is not venomous, and we've got the adder, which are rare, and I've never heard of an adder biting a dog in the UK. Okay, so even if you're in the UK and you're listening to this, there's still some lots of really cool information from this about apply the principles of what Eileen teaches for snake avoidance and we can apply that for deer, livestock, and boundaries training, or away from cats and other dogs and things like that. Okay, so lots of really cool information in this podcast. A really enjoyable conversation, and hope you enjoy it. And I'll catch you on the other side. Much love to you all. Okay, so welcome, Eileen, and thanks for taking the time out of your day. So I'm super excited about this because of the topic that we're talking about today. So thank you and welcome. Really appreciate you joining us.
And thank you so much for having me. I've been excited for this.
No, not at all. Now, we're going to talk about snake avoidance. We talked a little bit before we started recording, so we've got a fairly international audience on this podcast, but in the UK we don't have any venomous snakes. Well, we've got 3: adder, the slow worm, and the grass snake. And the slow worm is not actually a snake; it's a lizard with no legs. So we've got the adder is
a lizard with no legs.
Yeah, well, that's what it is, because it's not classified as a snake; it's actually a lizard. The grass snake is harmless, and the adder, which we get in some places, but they're extremely rare, and I've never heard of a dog bite from an adder in the UK. But that's not the case where you are. So we're going to talk a little bit about positively training snake avoidance.
Yeah, that sounds great. That sounds amazing, living in a place where there's not so dangerous of things for dogs, because here in the American Southwest where I live, there's just endless amounts of things that could harm them, different types of dangerous lizards. Of course, we have rattlesnakes. There's just a lot of things here. But the important thing is that this isn't just specific to snakes. These techniques can be applied to any sort of environmental hazard. I even use them with dog reactivity, trying to get animals to avoid certain dangerous plants, or to avoid when they see sheep or deer. It really can be applied just to about anything. But I came up with these techniques when my husband and I moved with our dog to Las Vegas, because he got stationed there with the military. And I was absolutely petrified about the potential for rattlesnakes being in our yard, and me not being there and being able to tell her to leave it, or me not seeing it first because they camouflage into the landscape. So that's what kind of got me to start thinking outside the box to create those techniques. But it's not limited to just being applied to that. It can be applied to a whole host of different things. Actually, I think there was somebody in England that was applying them to avoidance of toads, I think. I don't know if there's some type of poisonous toad there, but
Yeah,
you can do it with scent, which is how I do it with the rattlesnakes. You can do it visually. Scent's really nice, because that's how dogs mainly explore their world, is through their nose. I think a lot of times we try to think about what do dogs notice, and we think about how we experience the world, but it's so different from them. But that's the important thing, is you don't have to live in the Southwest to be able to utilize these techniques.
What's really interesting as well is you see, even just there saying see, we see so many, loads of our metaphors are visually related. So it's, where do you see yourself in the future? And these types of things, but that's not what applies, because you can't say to a person, where do you smell yourself in the future? That's how a dog represents the world.
Exactly.
So many of our metaphors are visual, but that's not so with a dog.
Yeah,
So
not so with a dog.
let's rewind a little bit. How did you get into dog training?
Very accidentally. I used to work in intelligence for the US government. I worked for the central. Yeah. I know, right? It's very true. Yeah. Everybody thinks it's so super secretive, knows all. Yeah, but yeah, like I worked for the Central Intelligence Agency in Washington, D.C. for a couple years. Then I transferred to working over with the Air Force at the National Air and Space Intelligence Center, which was pretty cool. Working like science and technology, and intelligence with that. Then I met my husband, and he's a fighter pilot with the U.S. Air Force, and so I had to move around with him, and worked at a couple different places. But once we started having more moves, one of our dogs got really anxious and really stressed about it, and I wasn't really sure what to do for her. So I was lucky to find a certified dog behavior consultant in our area. And she started, working with us and gave me so many insights that I just didn't realize into how to improve our dog's welfare, because that's really the bottom of it, is the welfare. A lot of times we think we're providing everything that they need, but we're not, because we're not reading their communication clearly, or not recognizing that there's something different they need versus another animal, that, previous pet or something. In her case, going from a more rural area to a slightly suburban area that had an was that like electric transformer or something like that, not too far away. There were noises that were bothering her, that we weren't aware of, because I couldn't even hear them. But there's so many things that can be creating stress for our dogs that can lead to all sorts of other behaviors. And so I just got fascinated by it, because I couldn't believe like the insights that she had from, just sitting with me and my husband and our dog and watching our dog wander around the room while she talked to us for like an hour and a half. And it just was life changing for her and for me. So then I started, trying to learn everything I could, started working, with noise sensitivities, reactivity. We moved to Las Vegas and I started training, teaching agility, because I was doing agility training when we were elsewhere. And, with dog sports, everybody wants to get their dog out there running the courses, doing all this stuff. But you see a lot of dogs who come in there and they're reactive to other dogs, they're sensitive to the environment, they have over arousal. And for me, those are all welfare issues, and we need to address those first before we're doing any kind of fun stuff and putting them in situations that maybe they're not prepared for. So it was really a good opportunity to reach some of those people. And then I ended up opening my behavior and training business, and just leaving all that military intelligence stuff altogether, which I was not really enjoying as much anyway. So I feel like I'm making a bigger bigger positive difference than I ever did elsewhere.
It's interesting because it sounds so. The last 6 years, I was a cop. In the last 6 years, I worked in covert policing. So
Oh, I didn't know
yeah,
you did covert police. Oh, geez.
yeah. So we did
Yeah.
mainly surveillance. I did
Hmm.
a brief stint doing some undercover work, buying drugs and stuff, but
Oh,
really,
geez.
really brief. Um, yeah, yeah. So I'd have liked to have done more, but I've just not the time in my life for the right for doing it. Now, I think as well, just and this is just aside from dog training, people think it's dead sexy, but see once you've done it, you're like, yeah, okay.
Yeah, that's how it was for me too. I did a rotation with the National Clandestine Service, which is the human intelligence component with CIA, because I was normally an analyst and I did a rotation over there, and it sounds way more sexy than it actually is.
Yeah. And human
Yeah.
intelligence is like dealing with informants and
Yeah.
covert assets. Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah. And it does, and there was I don't know if do you get it's a reality TV show. It's called Who Dares Wins. It's here. I don't know if you got it in the States.
No, I haven't heard of that.
So it's like a kind of they take civilians and they put them through some sort of military selection for special forces, and it's a game show. Not quite a game show, but
That sounds like fun.
yeah, yeah, it is. It's good. But they did one here, and it was called Spy School, and they only ran it for one season, and they had a MI5. So that's our we've got MI5 and MI6, which okay.
Yeah.
MI5 is internal, is domestic, and MI6 is international, like CIA. And she was an MI5 surveillance officer. So she did the same role as I did in the police, and she kept referring to herself as a spy. And I was like, you're like, you're a covert, you're a surveillance officer, you're not a spy.
Not a
So
spy.
yeah, yeah, yeah. So
Yeah.
so you moved, then you set up your business, and was that when you moved to Las Vegas, you set up your business?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, we moved to Las Vegas, and now we've been here 8 years. It's hard to believe, but
Yeah.
because we were never that long in one place with the military, you move every 2.5 to
Yeah.
3 years. So now we've just been here for a while, and it's been nice being able to really make an impact locally, because here most trainers use harsh aversive methods, especially for their first go-to for dealing with anything. And
Yeah.
I don't feel the need ever to use any of that sort of stuff,
Yeah.
because it violates the welfare first and foremost. And it's also not any more effective. I think it's actually less effective and creates its own problems. But that seems like a novel way of dealing with things here, unfortunately. So it's been nice being able to connect with more and more veterinary clinics because some of them were sending people over to these horrific trainers,
Yeah.
using these horrific techniques that were just creating more problems to the point that animals need euthanized. And, they have the very sexy marketing, it really appeals. And they'll walk around, and take all these videos of, their dogs doing this or that while they're on a shock collar. And I'm sure they don't include the bad takes where things don't go so well, but it's been nice, incrementally making change. I hope over time it ends up being a longer impact. It can be frustrating, but
Absolutely.
I feel like we end up being placed where we're making the most difference, where we need to be.
Yeah. And that's a common, or just so you know, that this light might go out. Okay. It's because it's getting dark here, but it's a battery operated for the light. So just in case it gets really dark.
Yeah.
One of the things we hear a lot, especially coming from the States, is that you can't reliably train snake avoidance without using aversives. So that's not how you do it. So let's talk about a little bit about how you do it and why using aversives isn't necessary.
Yeah, versus I don't find to be necessary at all. And actually, a number of the dogs that I've worked with had gone through aversive training multiple times and then been bitten by snakes because it's just like any other sort of, I guess, reactivity that we see with dogs. If there's something that they fear, sure, they may avoid it in the future, but other ones may try to make sure this never happens again by going after the snake and attacking it. And that's something that's not really talked about, but we do see that. And then there's other ones, who go through the aversive training and then they're afraid of the owner or afraid of being outdoors or any other the thing that was present at the time that they're kind of pairing with that experience because they don't understand why they got shocked. They're not really putting that together. So it's something that you don't need to do to have a reliable avoidance. And also, when you're doing these little 2 minute to 5 minute sessions where they shock your dog while trying to force your dog's face near a snake to smell it. Here, they're only training one species, and there are a number of different species whose scents they need to be familiar with, and they're not going to be trained against those. And also, with any type of scent work, you can't train obedience to odor in just 2 or 5 minutes. They're not going to be that great at detecting it. So, there's so many things that are flawed with that. I think it's just that folly of instant gratification that people want to invest, 5 minutes in something and then miraculously your dog's going to avoid this forever. And it's just not the case. But what I do is I try to, work on scent detection. And, that goes at a different pace for every dog. They don't have to have, extensive background in scent work, but usually those dogs pick it up faster. But most dogs are really good with it within 4 or 5 weeks. Some of them as little as 2 or 3 weeks, and they're avoiding all these hidden, scents that we have, even without a human telling them to do anything. Because a way that I do it is that, at first I'm training, verbal cues for them to, turn away from things. But I also use more than food rewards. I use a lot of play and toys and trying to train dopamine type responses, these responses that are, the level of excitement of if they were actually chasing after a prey animal, like a rabbit or a deer or something. Because for a number of dogs, this is something that's predatory, trying to go after a snake. For other ones, they're just curious. They just want to check out what this thing is. There are also other animals that are guarding their property, guarding the owner or another dog that's near them. There's so many different reasons why dogs go after the snakes. And I think that's important to address as well, like why is the dog even doing this to begin with? But, not every dog is going to just give that up for food. And so I want to train in some really strong chemical and emotional responses to the behaviors that I'm having them do, and then pairing that with the scent there. And so, because I want them to be able to offer that even when I'm not around. And then eventually we proof that with video cameras running when no person's around outside. We also do it off property, and it works really well, and the dogs think it's fun. So
there's a ton to unpack there. Okay, so we'll go through some of that. So you were saying at the start, the way it's historically been taught with an electric collar, a shock collar, is the dog sees the snake and is then shocked, or smells the snake and is then shocked. And then,
Yeah.
in quotes, pair those two things. So the dog recognizes the snake causes pain.
Mm-hmm.
But what you're saying there is the dog can make other associations. So it could be that area of the, I was going to say the bush there, or when you're out in the desert, that area, gets out the car and stuff.
Yeah.
This is where bad things happen and they start acting weird. Or we get the dogs that are similar that we get in humans. Not everybody has the same fear response to threat.
Right.
Some people will tend to go forward and try and fight it away, and other people will
Yes.
back off. So you're seeing the same things in dogs there, yeah.
Yeah, we see the same things in dogs, and I think part of it is learning history with dogs. Part of it is also genetic. Like there are some people that, if there is a grenade that's thrown into a building, some people will run away. Other ones are the ones that jump on it,
Yeah.
like the special forces people. Part of that's training, part of it's also who you are.
Yeah.
And I see that with dogs as well. One thing I always tell people about is how, 2 years ago, now I only have one Koiker because our other two, the Koiker dogs passed away, but I had 3 of them and they were all a little bit different. There was one day where I was blow drying my hair and something went wrong with blow drying my wet hair, and something broke like with the fan and it made some horrific sound. And 2 of my dogs went running out of the room, terrified. And my other dog, Beowulf, came running into the room, growling and barking to confront whatever the threat was towards mommy. And he was also our one who was reactive. He was reactive to strangers and dogs. Our other one, Gilgamesh, he's always been a little shy. Well, not anymore, but he used to be shy with people and dogs. But it was the same thing. They're both fearful, but they have really different ways of confronting that.
Yeah.
So it's the same thing with snakes. If you're trying to you show them that this equals pain or fear, not every dog's going to have the same behavioral response. So I like to work on training the specific behavioral response that I want. And it does not have to involve fear or fear of pain in order to trigger that. We can also have, more positive things that are triggering that. And, I don't know how many times like I've seen like Gilgamesh indicate that there's some snake there, and he's not taught to alert me or anything, but I know his body language by now. And then I'm like, wait, what's over there? He's, he does a certain type of sniff and then quickly turns his head away and moves on.
Yeah.
Because the thing is, you're not going to notice it first. The dog will.
So remember, and it's taken, and I always ask people when they're listening to this to take the elements of what we're talking about and see if there's an application with their dog. So remember our little dog, Watson, this was just the year after we got her, and she had taken her to the park. She'd done the toilet, and I'd picked it up to put it in the bin. And when I was coming back round, I was throwing a ball for her. And I could not have done this if I tried, but I threw the ball and it landed where she had done the toilet 40 minutes earlier. All right. It's like tiny, like it was a trace of crap on the ball, right? And she really likes playing with the ball. And she ran up towards it and stopped and recoiled and turned around to look at me and say, no way in a million years am I picking that up, And it's the same.
She has standards.
Yeah, absolutely. So it's recognizing when you're saying there about Gilgamesh, because you know your dog so well, he sees something in you've got that relationship, and you're like, oh, he's onto something there, and you know what it is. But that just comes through that deep level of training and observing your dog, and yeah.
And that's the thing, is that it's a two-way communication as well. I think sometimes with training, it's very one way, where people are telling the dog to do this and rewarding if they do it, don't reward if they don't do it. But if your dog's not doing what you want, figure out why. Like, what kind of feedback are you getting from them? Are you asking something that's too difficult? Or is it somehow conflicting with other emotions or other behaviors that may come about naturally? Being triggered by a certain stimulus. So like with this, I haven't had a dog who's not been successful at it yet, but I will say, like, I always tell people, use management, if you can in certain situations, because I mean, I'm not going to go hiking in some area that I know is absolutely infested with rattlesnakes where there's high winds and he's going to be off leash and not be able to scent them, and there's just way too many risks to really be worth it. Like I'm not going to do that, but we do sometimes go hiking in the mountains or deserts. I try to be reasonable with that. Like, don't put them in a situation where they're set up for failure.
Yeah. It's similar here with sheep,
Yes.
and people are like that. The answer sometimes is to keep your dog on a lead, especially during lambing season at the start of the year,
Yes.
February, March, April. Keep your dog on a lead around sheep.
Yeah.
You know,
Absolutely. Like, and people don't like to hear that, but sometimes that's the best answer for everyone involved. And, I've worked with people about, a deer or occasionally sheep or things like that so that they can smell and then look to the owner and come over, and then we'll put them back on leash.
Yeah.
So then they can walk by that area. But sometimes if it's lambing season or something and there's going to be that many things going on, just keep them on a leash.
Yeah.
So, yeah.
You do that with a young child.
Yeah.
Put them in a push chair, pick them up.
Yeah. Exactly. It really is the same sort of thing. I feel like everyone just feels like they're just limiting their dog so much, but this is about their safety as well.
And our lives are not unlimited. There's limitations. We can only drive so fast in driving through urban areas, and where, there's a variety of things that you can't take things that belong to other people. Our lives are limited.
Right.
And you learn to live with them.
And you learn to live with them. And, like I like to teach dogs like what those boundaries are in life. And you get to, I feel like once they understand what the boundaries are, they feel like they can navigate effectively within them. And that's what I like to do with this training. But sometimes there's just so many limitations. If you're going to see so many triggering stimuli, it's better just to keep them on the right path with a leash, like a long line, or if you're in an area where you can't have a long line, just a standard leash, and then be able to be off leash in areas where it is safe. But this training, it's good for if there's going to be a more limited amount of the stimuli that you're going to see from time to time, and teaching them the framework and teaching them the correct behavioral choices positively. Like, I don't use any sorts of, I try not to use any leashes at all, really, with it. With some dogs, if they're that, like, triggered by the snake at first, I'll have them at a great distance, maybe on a leash, but it's only just so they don't rush up and smell it, because what we're trying to teach them to do is to get a low concentration scent of the odor. I don't want them smelling like, going and satisfying their curiosity, like sticking their face up in the snake and then doing the behavior. Because one thing that we've learned in studies over the last several years is that dogs can differentiate between a small amount of odor and a large amount of odor, which is how we do like low blood sugar alert, which Gilgamesh also does, versus alerting for high blood sugar. They can get like a small amount of odor versus a large amount, and it can trigger different behaviors. So that's what we do with that. I want them to smell what the snake smells like when they're far away from it, and then have that avoidance behavior, rather than have to get up really close, see this thing moving around, and then somehow have the movement trigger them into a predatory sequence type pattern.
So that's then not quite okay, but if we're teaching, so when you're talking earlier on about, which I'm going to ask some more about, because there's a lot really interesting. You've got many species of snake have you got in Nevada?
Around where I live, I think it's like 6 different rattlesnakes, 6 different venomous ones.
Okay. So if we're teaching a detection dog on 6 different odors, so for law enforcement, we could have cadavers, a cadaver dog, drugs, explosives, currency, different types of drugs. So we'd have, narcotics, cocaine, marijuana. So that's 7 or 8. So we can train all them individually, and we do some dogs that will do multiple ones. So most dogs will do, certainly in Scotland, a lot of them will do drugs and firearms. Okay.
Okay.
Now the way that when we're working with a scent dog is that we're teaching the dog to go to the strongest point of odor.
Mm-hmm.
That's where if there's a kilo,
It's like opposite with this.
Yeah. Okay.
Yeah, it's opposite with this. Yeah, because other types of scent work I did, you're trying to get them to move closer and closer and indicate exactly where it is. With this, it's the opposite.
Yeah.
But a lot of people ask me if it's going to mess up their scent work that they do for competitions like nose work or barn hunt. And they're going to behave differently with this because the behavior is triggered by this specific odor. So they're going to do just fine, you know, with their other sort of scent work, because it's not like us where we just have this broad concept of scent work and like, oh, he's always going to offer avoidance to certain scents. No, it's triggered by this specific snake scent. So it really is the opposite, where we want this low concentration and then the avoidance rather than continuing to move closer. So with dogs that are just trying to lunge at anything new, I keep them as far away as needed so that they're not trying to get to it. And I prefer to do this off leash, and I do it with most dogs because I just like doing things off leash and, you know, trying to evoke the behaviors I want and, you know, really having a partnership and understanding there. And then we gradually will move closer as the dog's able to be trusted that they're not going to rush up and, you know, put their nose right up on that snake scent.
Where do you get the snakes from to do it?
I don't actually use live snakes for my training just because I'm concerned about the welfare of the snakes involved.
Yeah, of course. Yeah.
I know a lot of people who do the positive training do use that, but I want it to be positive for everyone involved. You know, like I wouldn't go and take a reactive dog and, you know, work on his reactivity by chaining some dog in a spot and, you know, parading up another dog near it. So that's how maybe I'm different than a lot of people, but, you know.
Well, it's interesting. I remember this was several years ago. A guy made some comment on, you'll be appalled at this. You're trying to train a dog. I was talking about, it was a small holding or something I was working on, and it was training the dog not to chase the chickens or something like that.
Mm-hmm.
And what this guy suggested, he came on to, I can't remember the details, but what he said was put the chicken in a cage and let the dog throw themselves at the cage until they get tired.
Oh, God.
I know. And I was like, well, what about the chicken?
Was the chicken gonna have a heart attack?
Like,
yeah,
you know, it's the whole
and that's
thing.
why I
Just
worry
the
about with the
chicken.
snakes.
Yeah.
Yeah, because I get snake skins. You can get them from our like reptile herpetology type societies. They're really happy to give them to you, and they just don't wash them, so they have the scent. And it's really nice because it has the odor, but it's not as strong as a real snake, because obviously a live one's going to smell a lot stronger. I've also used before like freeze-dried snakes, but I prefer not to get dead ones. I don't like people killing them. Like I like using the shedded skins because that's harmless. And then there's actually a couple people who keep pet rattlesnakes. It's just horrible, but I've gotten shedded skins from them. But I prefer getting them from the herpetology societies, and that way I can get the local species that we have too around here. There's also rattlesnake removal companies, and sometimes, you know, they'll do things where they put them back out in the wild, but every once in a while they'll have like shedded skins too.
Yeah. Okay.
And that's a nice humane way to do it.
So we've got the odor, the skin, or the, you know, dead frozen snake. So we've got that in the environment. You're working with your dog, and then what would the next steps be? And so I'm aware of not giving too many trade secrets away because this is how you earn a living, right? But it's to give people an idea of how it works. So what's our next stage?
Yeah, no, I don't mind at all. Because the reason I created this and started putting videos out there is I've gotten other trainers to use my techniques because I really just want it to spread and for people to stop shocking their dogs, because I think a lot of people don't really want to shock their dogs, but they don't think there's another way. And I know in a lot of locations, there just aren't any other alternatives. So people go and they put their dogs through this. So the next step would be like, once you have this odor, you want to keep your dog further away from it. You want to train them to like be able to turn on a dime and chase rapidly after something. So I'd train dogs to go to a platform where it kind of gets them to go to a visual target, but it's, you know, say 10 feet away from where the snake is, but they can smell it. They can smell it there and they may be able to see it. Eventually I do things where they're hidden, because that's going to be real life, where say the snake is under a bush, or it's under a rock, or it's on an elevated ledge, and that's going to affect how the scent disperses and their ability to locate it. But what I want them to do is notice that and then move rapidly in another direction. So I like to use a lot of play with that. You know, it just depends on what the dog likes. Every dog's different. I remember with one of mine, it was all about the food. You know, with her, it was all about food. And then with my other two, it was about ball play or chasing me, those sorts of things. And just trying to train a really excited response. And I guess also affecting value ratios, like anything new, a lot of dogs are so interested and so curious about it. My one dog, he wanted to guard the property from the snake, you know, because he had really strong guarding tendencies, that one Beowulf that I was talking about. And so I wanted to create more value and other opportunities when that snake was around. And he ended up being so good at it. But you know, it's just a matter of practice and repetition and going slowly, not, you know, putting your dog in such a difficult situation that the decision's difficult. I always wanted it to feel easy for them so that they could repeat it over and over and over in increasingly difficult situations, and creating a very well-worn neural network in the brain of these avoidance behaviors. But yeah, the key is, you know, getting them to kind of notice it and then rapidly turn away, whether you're cueing that with leave it or come or whatever it is, or go chase your ball, you know. I mean, it's a little more complicated than that, like how I do it, but that's the most simplified way to describe some of it. Because I also do things where they do arc patterns around it, because it could be in the middle of a walking path, and they're not going to necessarily do a 180 around it. They may try to walk in a big arc in avoidance and then keep moving on. I want them to know how to deal with all of that. So it's a little more complicated, but that's kind of how it goes. I'm trying to trigger a dopamine type response and all the endorphins and affect those value ratios where the snake just isn't all that interesting anymore, and they've practiced this avoidance so many times.
And that's through, our dogs are like most of us, we're interested in novel things. And then, you know, and then the less novel it gets, the more either mundane or routine it becomes. And that's what you're training here.
Yeah, that's part of it. Yeah. And it just becomes like a very specific behavior, because I eventually do it when I'm not outside, but I'm recording it on camera to see what they do. But I think that's part of it. And if they never satisfy that curiosity and they're doing so many other enjoyable and pleasant things while that thing's present, they're just not interested in it anymore. And then, you know, for my dog Beowulf, guarding opportunities were always high value. He loved to guard. You know, if he would hear a sound over the wall, that would be something that he just enjoyed, getting to go bark at it and tell it to go away. So that was something we always had to work on with him, like not doing those things. But rather than trying to stop a behavior, I would channel it into other things, like he would notice a sound out there and he'd come check in and tell me, like, Mom, somebody's walking by. And I just praise him, you know, oh, what a good boy, you know, because I'm never going to get rid of him noticing these things. He's always going to notice them, and they're triggering something internally in him because he's genetically hardwired for that. His father was the same way. Mom, not so much, but, you know, it's part of who he is. But I can change what comes after that. So with the snake sense, he would sharply turn up and look at me real quick and then move away. He's like, Mom, I noticed it, you know, but it didn't end up being where he goes and barks at it and nips at it or grabs it, or, you know, those sorts of things that could be dangerous for him and for the snake.
What's interesting about that, when I did an episode a few weeks ago on the predatory action sequence or predatory motor patterns. And it's going from the dog being stationary to then migrating, finding, hunting, chasing, catching, and killing, and then eating or guarding the prey object. And I don't know if I'd said in this in the podcast when I was doing it, each stage of those can be extremely reinforcing, though. Each part of it can be really good fun. When I was in the surveillance unit, so 6 years I did that for, and I think that our team made arrests about, I think it was less than 10 that we actually went hands-on, but the work was still awesome. It was exciting, and so we were out on the hunt for evidence or intelligence, and you get that piece, and then that's what satisfies you, because that's the objective. It's not to arrest the bad man. It's similar with that, isn't it? So the dog gets to,
Yes. There's dopamine released and all that anticipation of like getting, whatever that reward is, whether it's that piece of evidence or getting the next lead. And, like you're saying, and it's the same with dogs. For all those different stages, it's so reinforcing. So that's why I try to get them not to practice that. And so I go so slow with the training, because if I just put down a snake scent when I started this with my dogs and just let them loose, it doesn't matter if I had a whole chicken breast, they're not going to leave that thing alone. And, it's very reinforcing, but both the novelty of it and the seeking behavior that triggers, but then also that predatory sequence.
Yeah. And when you were saying about the kind of that immediate U-turn and come back and chase something, you've got the search work or the searching part, the scent, or either in the air or on the ground. That's before the chase part in the predatory sequence. So it's like the dog smells the snake and then gets to chase the ball. So we're still satisfying that.
That's
sequence.
Exactly what I'm trying to do with it. And like, I don't explain that in too much detail in my online course because it's more geared towards pet parents. But when I give workshops on it geared towards trainers, that's basically what we're doing, is we're trying to satisfy those needs that they need to perform this predatory sequence. I'm just directing it in another direction because I want this behavior to hold when I'm not there. And also because they're going to notice snakes when maybe I'm not outside and I'm not giving a toy reinforcement or a food reinforcement. And so I want there to be so much, I guess, reward history on it, that's very strong, that it's going to hold. So we're going to practice it once in a while, but I don't want the one time that I'm not there or that I don't notice it, they go get bitten by a snake. And so I think, getting to satisfy that predatory sequence in another direction, channeling elsewhere, is the ultimate for dogs.
And then there's huge applications for that around sheep, deer, where you are. You go is it gophers or prairie dogs you've got?
We have prairie dogs here. There's also horses in the area where I live. I'm in Las Vegas, but it's like on the outskirts in a more semi-rural area where there's a lot of horses, and there are dogs that try to chase them. And people, they think that, oh, it's semi-rural, I can just have my dog off leash. And no, they're going to encounter things they're not prepared for. They're just not. And then, I remember it was a couple years ago, there was these two horses that were running down somebody's street. Somebody else was telling me about this, that there were two horses that were tacked and no riders being chased by a dog. And so there are some dogs that predation can be triggered so easily, even by large livestock. We also have goats around here. There's just so many different things you can use it for, but I even use it for dog reactivity, because there are some dogs that, we're telling them, oh, good, you noticed a dog, here's a treat. They don't care about that treat. There's something else that's underpinning, like not all, like sometimes it's fear, but sometimes it's like guarding or other sorts of drives that are triggering their reactions to these dogs while they're on leash, or triggering their reactions to horses. There's just so many things, and training a dopamine type response can be really strong. So some of these dogs I've trained, like a U-turn behavior, and I do it on you can use like a rug or a platform. It was something very small, like 2x2 or 3x3, so that we can get a tight turning pattern. And, they approach that platform and then turn real quick and chase after a ball or something else. And then if you give that same cue word when they notice a dog on a walk, all of a sudden they whip around real fast. And then you can reward with a treat. And sometimes I do a quick little jumping pattern with my feet as if they're chasing me, even though I'm moving like a foot or two, but to try to reinforce that. And that has been a game changer for some of the dogs I've worked with who have real bad reactivity, but it hasn't been able to be addressed with just food rewards alone. Mostly German Shepherds. Those are the ones I see, because a lot of them that are bred around here, I think, have like there's real strong guarding tendencies and hyper alertness, and not always the best socialized. So
and that's similar to what I did with Logan, because it's not his reactivity towards other dogs wasn't or isn't, it's not fear-based, it's probably anxiety-based. It's like, I don't know what to do, but he's not frightened of other dogs. And I did similar. I built up a queue, and it meant I threw the Kong up in the air and he jumped and caught it.
Oh, that's awesome.
Hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of times when there was no dogs there.
No dogs there.
No, we see a dog ready, and he whips his head round, and I throw the Kong in the opposite direction. So he then chases the Kong, and what was really cool about what he would do is he would pick it up and shake it as if he was killing it. So it's like,
that's exactly what some of my dogs have done too.
So I need to get this out. So what I'll do is, like, it's like punching a pillow. I'll just take out whatever I'm feeling on the on the toy. So it's similar to that,
Oh, that is so similar, because I've done it as a catch thing with some dogs too, and some dogs, like, we always train it at home first, where there's no stimulus present, and just training the behavior like it's a fun thing, and you develop a cue word for it, and then, like you said, you do it when a dog's around, and it's like, oh my gosh, head whips around, and sometimes I've done it on a long line at a park where they're seeing dogs at a distance, so I can really get them moving and chasing whatever it is. It just depends on if we have the room and set up to do that, but that's preferable, especially if the reactivity is that intense, because that way we can be pretty far from things and then gradually work up until we're closer. But like you said, some dogs, it's a game changer. And especially if there's anxiety in the environment, when there's play, they're not really thinking about all that. It's a way to also counter condition the environment, especially if you've practiced this play at home and now you're taking the play into a space that maybe they're a little nervous because they're seeing certain things they're anxious about. It can really be a game changer. That's so cool. It worked for you guys.
And what's in the other thing that's interesting about him, when so there's an area, a fenced in area local to me where I get access to, and I get him set, so it's like the little Kongs, the ones that are just the size of your thumb. And I'll put maybe half a dozen or 8 of them out in this. It's probably about an acre, and he searches for them. Now, when he's on task searching for them, he ignores other dogs completely.
Exactly. And it's really interesting getting to look into their minds like that and how they think about the world, and what it really helps you figure out what's bothering them, what do they need. People think that reactivity is just cookie cutter solutions, and it's not. There's so many reasons that they're like that, and different learning histories, different trauma histories, different socialization, different drives, and being able to meet them, with what they need.
Okay. And then you'd said a little bit about how do we apply that to kind of boundary training? So, like, not going over the threshold of the house or the door.
Not going over the threshold, like, I've done that a number of different ways. With all my dogs, I just taught that when you get to the boundary door, you turn away, and then there's food rewards that are behind you and stuff like that. But you can do it with a visual boundary, but I've also done it like rural property boundaries, where it's either visual and there's something marking it, like certain shrubs or something on the ground or flags. But I think it's even stronger when it's a scent boundary. And that can be something that they spray on the ground that remains there for a long period of time, or certain types of plants that smell. Like here we have a lot of rosemary plants that have a really strong odor. It just depends on how you want to do it. But then we train the same thing, where if they're starting to approach the boundary line, the triggering like the movement away. But I also like to just have play and have things like that going on inside there anyway, not where they have to try to poke the boundary in order to get it.
Like in Jurassic Park, touching the fence.
Yeah, that's the thing. You don't want them to have to be bad in order to get the reward. And I
Yeah,
do the same thing with the snake stuff. Like if they're just being good and acting like it's not there, I'll give them food rewards.
sure. Yeah,
I don't want them to have to try to approach it in order for something good to
yeah,
happen, because that could put them in danger.
yeah,
Um,
absolutely. Yeah. And I
yeah.
think, do you get any resistance from dog guardians, because they then they then might say, well, the dog can just get access to those reinforcers anyway, so why do they need to why does the snake need to be there? Do you get that? We get it here.
Oh, yeah. I
Yeah,
always get people who are weird about just giving out reinforcers to dogs. I don't know what it is. I'm like, don't you want to be nice to them?
yeah.
Like, I
I
don't know.
think,
That's how I always think about it. And then when sometimes I've said that and they're like, oh, you're right. I think there's just this pressure from some of this balanced or punitive training world that you have to be ultimate alpha and
yeah,
hyper controlling of everything. And obviously I'm very much against that mindset. I feel
sure,
like we should be generous with our pets, especially since they don't have control and access to these things otherwise. But I'm kind of showing them that, about the value ratios. If they're getting all this other great stuff over here, they're not as interested in that. If they're getting bored over here, they're going to go check out opportunities over here where
sure.
the snake's at.
Awesome. Okay. So anything else that we've missed?
No, I don't think so. Any other questions that you have or things you want to talk about?
No, I think we're good. I think just so generally, what I'll say to people when we've got a guest on is that I ask them a question that a previous guest has asked. All right.
Mm-hmm.
So the question for you was, if you could have a conversation or go for a long walk with somebody alive or dead from history, who would that be? Who would you go with?
Oh man, that's a tough one. I don't know. Yeah, I really don't know about that. There's so many interesting people. Um, maybe this one's a weird one. But maybe I've always been interested in Zoroastrianism and Zarathustra. I've always been interested because like one of the most ancient like monotheistic religions. I'm not a
Okay.
member of that religion, but I used to study Iranian stuff when I worked in
Okay.
intelligence, and I've always been interested in that because it was kindness towards animals.
Sure. Okay.
It's like one of the main tenets of it is kindness towards animals, and also like dogs were considered at the same level as people and could
Okay.
replace people in some of their ceremonies, which I find interesting. So I would love to go on a walk with Zoroaster, or they call him Zarathustra. That would be really interesting.
Yeah. Okay. That's
Because
cool. That's
I'm
unusual.
like, where have we gone wrong since then? Because things have changed significantly.
Yeah. I
Because
know.
one of the issues that I sometimes have working with people are very different cultural mindsets towards animals, where they believe that they have dominion over all animals,
Yeah.
and that it's if they are kind to them, it's just because they're being generous, not because animals are sentient beings
Yeah.
and have rights, or are entitled to good welfare or anything like that, or should have choice. It's a very different cultural mindset, and so I'm like, that is completely opposite from what Zoroaster or
Sure.
Zarathustra was preaching, and some of these more ancient religions. And so I was like, how did that change?
It's
But I would
in.
love to go on a
I
walk with
know.
him.
It's we were talking about earlier on with the no. So the last wolf was killed in Scotland or in the UK in like 1790s or something like that.
Oh geez,
Yeah. Yeah. So
wow, that's
that.
a long time ago. I
Yeah.
figured it was more recent.
Yeah, and we had lions and bears up until about 400 or 500 years ago,
Mm-hmm.
in Britain, and but they also then the Victorians, they killed osprey, red kites, because they thought it was because they had all these estates for
Yeah.
the aristocracy. They thought that they would be killing the partridge and pheasant and all the rest of it. And they wiped everything out. And it's just been through a big rewilding. I mean, and I remember as a child them bringing osprey back and having breeding pairs, and so which is quite the opposite from what you're describing.
Yeah, yeah, it's just like, you know, I feel like one of the hardest things with welfare is trying to get people to use positive methods is getting a different view of animals to begin with, that they are sentient beings. And I do think like culture is part of that, but religion also comes into play with that, just depending on background and everything. So it can be challenging, you know, because you have to meet people with where they're at.
Yeah,
But it's something that I think that, you know, every situation we walk into is unique. You know, I know things are different in the U.S. versus in Scotland, but even in different pockets of the U.S. and different homes, different communities, everybody comes with a different mindset. And so I found that so interesting, thinking about like somebody like 5,000 years ago or whatever it was, who was very much speaks to me, you know, and my ideas, because I'm like, how did that happen back then? And then now it's so
it's
different,
completely
you
different.
know, where shock collars are okay, chaining up your dog in 120-degree heat outside without water is somehow people don't get
Acceptable.
penalized. Like, it's just bizarre.
Yeah, it is.
Yeah.
Yeah, awesome. This has been fascinating, and it's been a quick hour, so and we could probably talk some more, which we'll probably do in future. So yeah, this is wonderful. Where can people find your stuff, your education?
Um, you can go to my Facebook page, Confident Canines LLC, or you can go to my website, www.confidentcaninesdogtraining.com. And I'm also on Instagram, but I'm most active on Facebook and then on my website.
Awesome. So we'll get those linked into the show notes for people as well. And see if they need anything more from you. So this is wonderful. I really appreciate your time. So thank you.
Well, thank you so much for inviting me. It's been awesome.
You're welcome.